Say, it wasn't my first review of 2025 a VR game as well. That's right, Batman Arkham Shadow. There must be something about the ticking over of the new year that makes me want to stick my head around the door of VR and check to see if we're living in the Lawnmower Man future yet. So over the holidays I tried out Thief VR Legacy of Shadow, which also has the word shadow in the title in a slightly uncanny parallel, but it's appropriate because a shadow is exactly the thing I need to put over my face after a couple of hours in VR, which you'll recall stands for violently regurgitating. Thief VR was recommended to me by a colleague since he knows I'm a fan of the old Thief games, and I guess he thought this would help me finally reach the acceptance stage of the grieving process because my goodness me, this game's a pile of shit. The first warning sign was that it used the logo of the most recent Thief game, which in terms of marketing to fans of the franchise is like trying to sell people on a boost to Noel by making it look uncannily like a massive dog turd. And the really pathetic thing is that it's obviously trying to haul the Neo Thief IP back towards the old good ones, like it's pulling on the reins of a terrified horse. So characters say taff again, and there are secret treasures referencing quest items from Thief 1, and the mechanists from Thief 2 show up again at one point, curiously glossing over the fact that Thief 2 ended with the mechanists turning into robot slaves and genociding themselves. And most importantly, they bring back Stephen Russell as the voice of Garrett. He's not the main character though, he's a voice in the main character's head, speaking just often enough that they could justify putting his name on a poster, but not so much that the recording booth session would have taken more than an afternoon of the man's time. And all of this in execution is akin to the massive dog turd acquiring a light dusting of powdered sugar. Thief VR Legacy of Shoddy follows Magpie, a young thief in the capital C city, where there's an evil noble who controls the corrupt city watch, and there's a blend of medieval and electropunk technology, and sentence gradually trails into slurring blur. In short, absolutely bugger all has changed in whatever time has elapsed since previous Thief games, except there was apparently some citywide rezoning protocol that means all the buildings have to be really titchy now. The death spiral of the Thief series began with Thief 3 when the march of graphics technology precluded the complex sprawling open-ended maps of the early games, and that spiral continues right down the S-bend with this one. We sneak our way through a succession of painfully small maps, all with much the same aesthetic and populated by a handful of clones of the same three guards, voiced by the first three dudes who showed up to the audition who could put on a mildly convincing British accent, at least one of whom was probably a confused DoorDasher. They're quite easy to stealth around because they have the modern stealth game habits of having patrol routes no longer than their own height, and frequently vocalise every thought that crosses their mind at full volume, as if under the impression that there are casting agents trapped inside the walls. That said, whether or not you're hidden in shadow only seems to be related to how much light is falling on you about 50% of the time, so I was still getting spotted a fair bit. You have the mandatory thief visibility gem, but it's stuck in the back of your hand, and the only people who have the backs of their hands in view at all times are typists and enthusiastic Nazis. When you get spotted, obviously you have to fight whoever spotted you, which brings us to combat. Now, I've previously stated that the combat in a stealth-focused game is kind of supposed to suck, because if it comes to that, you've already fucked up, and that's a philosophy I fear Legacy of Shawaddy took a little bit too much to heart. The idea is you're supposed to parry incoming attacks by swinging your blackjack in specific ways. Quick question, how the fuck can a wooden and leather kosh, wielded by a schoolgirl with a northern accent and about 3 acting lessons, stop a sword thrust from a professional soldier? Quick answer, listeners, it fucking can't. At least not for me. I just could not get the parry to consistently work outside the tutorial. On the bright side, it did mean that I managed to get the no alerts and no kills award on every single mission, because before long, if I got spotted at all, I just roll my eyes and smash quick load, like a hypochondriac with a life alert bracelet. Christ, that simile showed my age, didn't it? Oh, and combat is basically the only way to lose health, so if you never engage with it, you never need healing items, and that's another entire branch of the gameplay risk-reward tree that can be entirely disregarded, sawn off and minced up to be added to inexpensive school dinners, and it's a flimsy-ass game before it starts rendering its own mechanics obsolete one by one. There's a list of upgrades you can buy if you achieve certain objectives, but the game's so easy it fucking literally ran out of upgrades to give me about 4 missions in. But let's get back to the story, because the whole plot justification for bringing back Stephen Russell is that Magpie finds an old cybernetic eye containing Garrett's spirit, and it forcefully bonds with her, which I took to mean replaced one of her real eyes in a theoretically upsetting but in practice glossed over kind of way, at which point she hears his voice in her head. But what makes it feel so cynical is that this has literally no bearing on anything else. Garrett doesn't become a mentor figure because Magpie already has one, a lady named Cassandra who fences her loot for her but is otherwise a straight plot functionary with all the characterization of a whiteboard that doesn't even use multiple colours of dry erase marker. Garrett's status also has bugger all to do with the game's central objective, which is to stop the evil nobleman from performing a magic ritual that will do something bad. I think someone mentioned it destroying the city, but I forget the specifics. Moot point anyway, because in the end we foil the ritual by walking around a room pressing 3 buttons to almost no resistance. So Garrett's only purposes are 1. Justify the Witcher vision mechanic, wherein the things you're obviously meant to notice acquire glowing halos to make them even more obvious, and 2. Act as fucking DVD commentary track, making a token snarky response to everything Magpie says. Not particularly gelling with Garrett's established personality, and Stephen Russell doesn't sound into it either. There is a struggle going on in the world of VR. On one side we have developers making games for it that are significant full-on installments of their respective franchises, like Half-Life Alyx, Arkham Shadow, maybe Deadpool VR, which is okay if you can both stomach VR motion sickness and Neil Patrick Harris making poo jokes for 10 hours. And on the other side, you have quite a lot of games like Thief Shadowy Legover, which are short, flimsy reminders that a franchise exists exists at best, the equivalent of a pop-up book version of a classic film aimed to help low attention span toddlers understand the thing mummy and daddy seem to like. One type of game enforces VR as a viable, legitimate platform for the artistry of games, the other enforces its status as a gimmicky toy for a niche audience with strong gag reflexes. The battle rages on, and Thief VR has very firmly planted its flag into its own foot because it's a useless fucking knob end.